Yep, I've got it down to 50 now. How is that?
Wow.
I put it down to 50%. Is that better? All righty. All righty. How about 75%? How's that?
Good.
Yep, I've got it down to 50 now. How is that?
Wow.
I put it down to 50%. Is that better? All righty. All righty. How about 75%? How's that?
Water.
Give me just a minute here. I'll let you know when we're on the air.
Thank you.
We are on the air.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And hello, everybody. First of all, welcome. And this absolutely beautiful day, which is such an improvement from the rain or blistering heat we have had recently. This is the way summers in Maine should be.
Amen.
So the first thing we're going to do tonight is a presentation by the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative, which is not technically will not technically be part of the BAC meeting. We'll open up the BAC meeting as soon as the presentation is done. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to John Dykstra, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Kate. Dave, should we promote Leah, or do you just have her speak, whatever you feels best?
No, she needs to use chart.
Yes, she'll be actually doing a presentation for us, Dave, so she'll need permission to share as well. Thank
We
you.
should promote Ed too. I see he's in the queue.
Oh, is he there? Good.
Okay. Thank you. And we welcome Ed with us, our Board of Selectmen participant in the committee, and Leah, who is with KCI. I know Leah for years with the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. She and I did education stuff together, which I miss miserably, but she has moved on to be with the Kennebunkport Conservation Initiative and will be speaking with us tonight. So, Leah, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks. But just so you know, I still have 10% of my time as KCT, but
Excellent. That's only 90% too little.
that's right. That's right. So I have a little bit of a presentation. Let me see if I can share. All right. So it should be sharing my screen at this point.
Looks good.
Awesome. So just so you know, my name is Leah Lowry, and I am the Director of Programs and Outreach for the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative. And some of what I'm going to talk about tonight, I actually presented to the Selectmen's meeting with the Southern Maine Planning Commission. And so I just wanted to I'm going to breeze through some of that stuff, but I always like to warn people. The first part can be a little tough because there's a lot of hard stuff to hear, but I promise I get to the really good stuff in a minute. So just bear with me. But this is my information, my contact information. Please feel free to reach out at any time. And I just want to let you know some of the stuff that we're doing, some of the reasons why we're doing it, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free. And I will rush through some of the science unless you guys tell me otherwise, because I think you probably all are pretty keenly aware of what's happening. But I like to start at the beginning. So as you guys know, we've got the greenhouse effect happening. We've known about this since the 1800s, and actually there are some amazing scientists that discovered this, and the names just totally escape me at this point, but the greater concentration of these greenhouse gases just means that we have more is being trapped. It's like having a blanket over the earth that's trapping some of the heat in, and it's causing some issues with temperature rise. The greenhouse gases, the major ones, are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. And this causes something called the albedo effect, which is where those sun rays come in and they can't escape. And what is the reason this is a problem for us here at Goose Rocks Beach is because it's causing some issues with our seas and our water. And these are the problems, but I promise I won't spend too long on them because it is depressing. But sea level rise, and ocean temperature rise. So the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of bodies of water its size in the world. And it's also because of this, because of the influx of fresh water and because of the temperature rise, it's also increasing in ocean acidification. Also invasives, there's more invasive species. So you'll see more green crabs, less of our, which eat up all of our mussels. Some of you guys may remember Stage Harbor a long time ago used to be complete mussel beds, and now there's very few mussels. And some scientists at GMRI and UNE are saying that that is a direct effect of some of the invasive species as well as some of the water issues. The other thing that the Maine is contending with is that the Northeast is warming faster than any other region in the contiguous United States. So we're kind of where we are in southern Maine because of our lower lying beaches. We don't have the craggy, rocky shores like we do down east. And because the warming waters, because of the warming temperatures, we're really seeing the effects of sea level rise very quickly. And I always like to start, or the effects of climate change very quickly. I always like to start with saying, you can address this as stories of change, regardless of what you believe about climate change or whether or not it's human caused. We do know that the earth is warming, and we do know that increased carbon dioxide is causing that warming and greenhouse gases. And really, when we start talking to people in the community, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that later with the students, we talk about stories of change. And when we think about what things have changed in our lifetimes in this area, you will start to notice there are certain things. And because it happens so gradually, we always call that the boiling frog, right? They don't know until it's too late. But the reason we see these changes, we just don't tend to talk about them. So I always open it up and ask, who has seen some changes? And I can't see any of you all. So if you want to just yell out, anybody who's on the actual panel, if you've seen any changes in the Goose Rocks Beach area since you've been there.
I've seen so many dunes. The dunes come and go, but Riley was a real wake-up call for me. It took out 20% of our dunes, maybe closer to 30%. Yeah. And they're starting to come back, but one more storm and we'll lose all that again.
Yeah, and that's what this picture actually is. It's Goose Rocks Beach right after Riley.
I've seen, it used to be you could see hundreds, or it seemed like thousands of lobster buoys right from the shoreline. At nighttime, if you were in the evening at the beach, the sun would hit them all, and all of a sudden you'd realize that they were all out there, and they've moved out. They're not there anymore, and I assume that's because the water is too warm in close to the shore. I'm not quite sure.
Yep.
And the thing that I've noticed is, and again, maybe I just didn't notice them before, but it seems to me we have more, quote, astronomically high tides or low tides. I don't know if that ties in with climate change at all, or just by being more aware of it and noticing it happening more frequently now.
Yeah, it absolutely has to do with the warming temperatures and the warming oceans. We're having increased storms, increased storm surges, and the water levels are higher. And so our astronomical high tides are higher as well.
And the water expands, right, Leah? So actually yes. The heat is expanding the water. So what was a 9-10 foot tide now is an 11-foot tide.
Yeah.
I've noticed the loss of kelp, seaweed on the beach.
Yes.
Loss of our sand dollars, the loss of our starfish, loss of our sea urchins, all the things we looked for in tidal pools when we were kids. They're all gone.
And some of that may not all be climate change, but yes, some of that definitely.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, great. I just like to always be aware of the changes, because sometimes we don't take that second to just think about what changes we've seen in our lifetime. You know, it's not always in the forefront of our mind. So thank you for participating. So sea level rise, is it really an issue for us? We're number 5 in the top 20 towns affected by sea level rise. So yeah, it's going to be an issue for us. And part of that is what I referenced before, that we tend to be a low-lying beach as opposed to down east, where sometimes you have those craggy cliffs, and that has a little more protection for the houses in the upland areas than where we are, unfortunately. So this is kind of an older, it's from 2017, and I really want to find the newer ones, but I got this from GMRI, and it's NOAA, but this is the projected sea level rise. And people often question, like, why does it vary so much? Like, what are we meaning by very low, low, or intermediate low? How come we don't have a clearer picture? And, part of it is because we've never been here before, and we don't really know how fast things are melting or how fast things are going to warm up. What we do know, if any of you got the IPCC report that came out last week, is that things are moving enormously faster than we originally thought. And so back when this came out, this was saying that the very low and low were going to be those scenarios that if by 2020 we curbed our use of greenhouse gases dramatically, which we have not done, and actually we've increased a little bit. So remembering that the greenhouse gases don't just dissipate tomorrow when you stop using them. Whatever we have in the atmosphere right now is baked in for 30 years. So we know that from right now until 2050 or 2051, whatever is in our atmosphere at this moment is baked in until 2051. And that's true for next year to 2052 and so on. And so until we really start to decrease this, we can't change this graph. It's 30 years in. And the other piece is, so we already know we're headed for at least low or intermediate low already. That's kind of baked in unless we learn how to pull it out and have better carbon sinks. So it's not hopeless. It's just we don't really know how to do that yet in massive ways. We know how to do it in small ways. So what does that mean for Goose Rocks Beach? So what I did here is, and I can throw in the chat as soon as I'm done, where I've gotten these maps from so that you guys can play with it. And you can actually look at this all throughout the post. It came from a GMRI project where they were communicating with communities about what they were going to be facing in the future. So this is Goose Rocks Beach today as it shows on the map, and you can see the rivers. And this right here would be intermediate low. So this is basically what we are looking at facing. It's baked in for 30 years. You can see where the dark blue comes in. You can start seeing where it's inundating. And this is pretty much a 13.6 high tide. So right now that's our astronomically high tide. So that would be what you would see in those super high tides that you mentioned earlier. And that's going to be pretty much our normal high tide at that point. What I want you guys to pay close attention to is over where the little river is, because there are roads back in there that, you don't realize how far back some of these brooks and stuff go. And then that all of this water does go into those as well. So our next scenario right here, this is, this would be, this is our high extreme. This is our high level of inundation. So high level inundation means a sea level rise of 8 feet, 8.8 feet, right around there. And that is talking about a 20.8 foot high tide.
But what year would this be, Leah?
This is 2100. Sorry.
2100.
I should have mentioned that. Yes, 2100. So this is like if we start to take care of things, a global peak in around 2050, and we start taking care of it at that point, like meaning that by 2050 we hit peak and then we start lowering those emissions. So remembering that 30 years is baked in. And then this, of course, is if we do nothing at all to eliminate our production of greenhouse gases. And you can see Winter Harbor Road is inundated. Yeah. And that seems so far away from the beach at this point, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to even imagine. And that we're talking about a 22.9, almost a 23-foot high tide. This would dramatically change our coastline, meaning that the entire ecosystem will be different. Out where we see our high tide zone right now, that would be low tide. So this is if we do nothing, but we're not going to do nothing, right? Like there's hope, we can do things. So I just wanted to give you guys those maps, and I definitely will put this in the chat afterwards so that you can look at it yourselves and look at all the explanations, because I think that's important to see it and not just have someone show it to you. This was also in the town presentation, and this really was talking about the dunes, and the changes from 2017 to 2018 showed a lot of, you can see where the red goes down, that's a lot of erosion, but also remember that that is after Riley. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen the newest one to show any accretion. You can see where it dips in, there's more erosion. There is still also some accretion, and some of that comes from the way that the tides come in. Also, the seawalls can affect that. So just keeping that in account. But at this point, Goose Rocks is eroding faster than the state average and is losing beach a little faster than the state average. And part of that is because of those extreme storms. It's very vulnerable to those. Right now, there are less than 20 miles of private and public roads at risk to monthly flooding, but with just 3.9 feet. Now remember, that's our intermediate situation, and that's what we're facing by 2100. That's 115 miles of roads. And we're probably gonna face that a little faster, simply because they're showing that things are happening faster, like the ice caps are melting faster now, exponentially faster now that they've gotten to a certain temperature and things like that. Sea level rise is a really complex issue. And when I work with students, we really have to take a lot of time to talk about this. And this is the 3 lenses that we like to view it through, because I think so often when we hear people talk about changes in the climate or climate change or anything like this, we only focus on the ecological, and that's just not going to be enough, right? Like we have to take into account the economic impact, because some people are going to be economically impacted, and we have to take into account the sociocultural. And until you really take into account those 3 lenses and come up with solutions that take all 3 into account, that's the only way we come up with sustainable solutions. You know, it's a viable solution if it's economically okay and it's ecologically okay. But if we're not paying attention to the sociocultural, then what I mean by that is like, what's the culture of our communities? What is the long history, the standing history, and the families who have lived here for generations, and all of these pieces that come into play, those have to be taken into consideration. You can look at places in Louisiana where they have already had to evacuate entire communities, and it's devastating. It's devastating to those communities that have lived there for generations and generations. And so we have to really think about this in a really empirically, like through these 3 lenses, to come up with really sustainable solutions that are acceptable to the way we live, the cost of it, as well as the ecological impacts. And I think that's one of the things that KCI really works hard to do, both to educate this way, but also to look at problems through these lenses to make sure that we're not forgetting someone or something that needs to be considered. This is also from that presentation, and one of the things that we always like to talk about is that benefits of strong and early action on climate change outweigh the cost. It's going to cost us so much more, and we see this from hurricane devastations in other places, like in Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey. The amount that they had to do afterwards was billions and billions of dollars, whereas once that infrastructure is in, they are protected. And so really thinking about being proactive versus reactive, because when you're reactive, we lose life, we lose historical places, we lose livelihood. But if we can be proactive, we might be able to find some solutions that are sustainable. So how do we move forward? This again, these next two slides are definitely from the town presentation. These are ways that municipalities can address climate change. And this is talking about, energy use and how we get a stormwater catchment and being able to keep that from flooding. New Jersey did some amazing things where they have these benches in town, but underneath those are stormwater catchments. So you don't even know that they're there, but if it floods, it catches all of that water so that it doesn't it's like a barrier between that and the main street. But it looks like beautiful benches that people sit on to look at the water. So just coming up with creative ways to catch the water as it's coming in. How are we going to deal with our wastewater? Looking at where we have electric stations and stuff like that that are close to where they could be inundated with water, infrastructure. All of these pieces are things that our town can start looking at, really addressing codes to think about what people might have to do to protect their properties or what people might need to do to protect public lands from inundation and things like that, which also plays into zoning. So just really thinking as we move forward, like how can we think about our land sustainably and in a way that is going to help protect us? And especially a place like Goose Rocks Beach that is incredibly vulnerable. And then just really quickly, I wanted to address mitigation versus adaptation. So we're going to have to do both. We know, as I said, that intermediate low, I should say, is baked in. So we know we're going to have to adapt, right? We know we're going to have some inundation. So how do we protect our homes? How do we keep things from polluting the waters when they do come up? How do we have management plans in place? What kind of infrastructure upgrades, just like I was talking about, whether it's putting houses up higher, things like that. And then mitigation, these are ways to stop climate change. So these are actions to eliminate the gases going into the air. And that's more like your sustainable transportation, as you can see, energy efficiency. And then in the center where there's kind of that overlap is a combination of all of the things, or is kind of the combination of the two. So water conservation and education, I just want to point that out because we're going to get into what we're doing. But yes, education is a huge piece. And where do we play a role? So I just want to introduce you to the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative. And this really grew out of some programming from the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. We have a mission to empower youth voices for climate action. We have two core programs. One is the Learning Labs, which is a space where climate change education becomes youth action. And some of you will recognize some of the things that I talk about in the end with what we're doing with students out on our properties and in the community and the reason why we're doing them. And we also have clubs and coalitions, and that's where we reach out to other organizations and partner with organizations and direct to youth empowerment. But if you notice, both end in action because we're at a point now where we can't continue to just talk. We have to learn, and now that we've learned and we know, we need to move forward and act. And I believe that true collaboration, as you see it in the bottom, it's an integral part of the fabric of our community, right? Like we have to work together and it's going to take every single voice. These are, again, right now, our learning labs, we only have invasive species, renewable energy, and sea level rise, but coming out in September will be a general climate change one, a fires and wildfires, which seems wildly appropriate right now, and then also floods and droughts. And all of these will be kind of out there. So why KCI, why youth, why now? It may seem counterintuitive to work with youth because they're not voting yet. And so I get that question a lot, like, why are you guys focused on youth? And I can tell you that if I can play this, it's only 2 minutes, but I'd love for you to hear.
This is the checker
Oh,
game where
shoot.
grandson and
Hold on.
granddad will bond. These students are seniors at Kennebunkport High School. The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than any body of water on the planet. We want to think globally, think about how climate change is affecting us regionally, and then act locally.
I feel like this class is different from other classes because of the hands-on factor. I feel like I can create change. I also understand better the reasons why the change isn't happening so fast, and being more empathetic to the way that creating change affects other people's lives.
We're able to actually get out in our local environment and see the difference between how it works on paper, how it works in reality, and now seeing what we were able to accomplish. I think it was really special.
What I'd really like them to feel is more empowered to do this kind of practical problem solving in their own lives as members of a community. That's really the big picture of what we want them to get out of it.
I'm kind of a sharp person, and I was never, I don't think I would ever do the things I did in class.
Before this, I looked at the issue and saw it as this big, daunting thing, and now it's been really, really amazing having this realization that every little thing counts and I can make a difference, even though there's these huge issues.
The warmer waters and new organisms coming in, rising sea levels, and people are going to have to adapt, and the community is going to have to work together to make a change. That choice has got to be made quickly, not over a long period of time.
My dad being a lobsterman, that if climate change keeps continuing to increase, it's just going to affect his livelihood and my family's livelihood.
The usual point that's tied to climate change, which is, it's not going to affect me. It's going to affect your kids. It's going to affect the next generation.
After the class, I realized that almost all towns and coastline across Maine are really one big community.
We don't know what the end result's going to be. There isn't a right answer.
People think that, the world's going to end in like a million years. Nothing's going to happen much. Like, people are going to be fine. Organisms will be fine. We'll be dead by then. But no, it's happening a lot faster than we think.
So I hope you were able to see that. Were you able to see that?
We heard it. We heard it.
We heard
You
some of
couldn't
that.
see it. Okay. Can you see now?
We've got your presentation up, Leah. You need to start the slideshow again.
Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. That's so bizarre. I don't know why.
Okay.
Want to start on 19 or something? Yeah. Or start on slide 18. Yeah.
Or perhaps leave more time for questions.
Yeah.
I don't mean to denigrate watching that. I'm just trying to.
Oh, no. You're fine. I'm just trying to figure out. You can see where I am now. I don't know why this is funky for some reason. Just really quickly, it started real conversations and grassroots action. As you guys know, we're the first, Kennebunk is the first town to have an electric vehicle, command vehicle for Kennebunk Fire and Rescue. It's the first one in the country, and that was absolutely directly related to the students doing action projects within the community and engaging community members. Solar panels on the Conservation Trust, totally related to that as well. And the hope is that these actions that the kids are doing and these empowering movies and such and educational opportunities are going to start getting the word out. This is a different video. I won't show it to you, but it's one that the actual students created about the beaches and sea level rise. And ultimately, they have an ask at the end of any action project. And those asks are, how do we work together as a community? One of them is to create, I'm stopping sharing, but one of them is creating ways for composting. One of them is creating education opportunities for students, kindergarten through 12th grade. Not obviously all the scary stuff when they're younger, but trying to make sure that we're incorporating what's happening to their community and really basing them in their community. Maine, our biggest export is our students and our children. And what we're trying to do is change that so that we're creating really students who are aware of what's happening in their backyard. They're working in their backyard to try and come up with more solutions and ultimately want to stay here to help solve the problem. You've seen them, they're learning how to do beach monitoring. They're not perfect at it yet, but they're working on it. And when we have good data, we send it in. And when we don't, I call and say, nope, it wasn't accurate enough, so I don't want to send it in. We try really hard to keep them apprised of all of the different things that are happening. They're working on shoreline reconstruction. They're working on Phragmites, and all of this information is going towards scientists, and they are having scientists come in and talk to them, and they want to be able to engage the community and help spread information. And the biggest piece to me is just that we have an opportunity to engage youth and empower their voices. They are non-political beings. It's not about politics. It's not anything to do with that. We're nonpartisan. And what we found is if I walked into a room, you guys would assume what I believed, who I voted for, all of those things, and you might shut down or open up depending. And what we found with youth is that they don't have that problem. They're able to sit down at a table and start a conversation, and people's guards go down, so we're able to have real conversations and start talking about solutions and why it's not simple. And so that's been really good. And they are our future leaders. They have a powerful voice, and quite honestly, we need them. So that's what KCI is about. We are working really hard to find answers and solutions in Goose Rocks Beach and Kennebunk and Arundel as well. So if you guys have any questions at all, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Whoa.
I know there's been some activity out on Goat Island looking at alternative sources for energy. What's happening with that? Is there some thought that there might be a way to get some power out there without having to depend on a cable?
We'll see. That's where the class started, was getting Goat Island off the grid. They have ruled out tidal. They're looking at wind and solar. This year, they're working on a 3D printout of the island so that they can go and have community conversations with actual solar panels, with actual windmills, so you can see what it would look like visually and not just imagine it in your head. And they've also gone to the Maine Historical Society, who wants to see that rendition, and then they'll have conversations. But a lot of it is going to be out of their hands after this year. It's really going to be up to the trust, the Maine Historical Society, and the community.
Thank you. All right.
Well,
hey, Kate.
Yes?
Hi. Leah, that was a great presentation. And it, we live back up close to Winter Harbor, and I've always felt very safe. As a matter of fact, my husband and I have joked for years, well, if we live long enough, we might have beachfront property or waterfront property. Unfortunately, your chart showed me just how accurate that might be. As a matter of fact, we might be underwater. So, and I'm delighted to see that you're getting young people involved in this, because they're the future. They're the ones that are going to be affected by it way more than we are. But, we're talking 2050s, and between 2050 and 2100, that's their lifespan, not ours necessarily. So thank you so much for the good work with them. I don't have a specific question other than to feel a little shaken by, what is still left to be done, and hopeful that even some of the smaller things we can do here, because I feel in some regard that the outcome of whether we're at the low, intermediate, or whatever, the effect of the water rise and we'll have on Goose Rocks is not so much dependent on what we can do here as what the broader world, other parts of this country and elsewhere can do. But it's nice to think of some of the, maybe there are some things that we have control of here that, and get the kids interested in what is, as you said, they will be ambassadors.
Yeah, and I agree with you on some levels, but I also believe that almost all of the major systemic changes in our country have started from grassroots movements, when essentially it's the people who want to protect the places they love. And that's what we're really trying to do with KCI is start grassroots action all over the country to push policy and push action in larger ways with businesses and things like that. Because you're right, it's not going to be whether or not you recycle. It's going to be whether or not we can create a large enough movement to push people and push businesses and push everyone to start making some bigger changes.
Yeah. Dave, do we have any questions from the community?
I don't see any
I
hands.
see no hands raised.
Okay.
Well, thank you all. And I just want to say there is hope. There is hope. I really do believe that. I think that I'm amazed at what humans can do when we work together. And I think there are small things happening around the world. And I would be totally depressed in this organization if I didn't really believe that. I think there is hope. We just all have to work together.
Great.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So Dave, are we gonna, I don't mean demote Leah, but get ready to start the actual Beach Advisory Committee meeting. And we are right about at the time we could announce publicly that we would be starting, so I think we can do that. Was somebody saying something to me there? Or?
No, there's just an echo, but go ahead, let's deliver it.
Okay. Joanne, yes, okay, great. All right, we will switch hats, so to speak, and this is now officially the Beach Advisory Committee meeting. I'm going to call that to order because we're on Zoom now. We'll do this. What is that? I have no idea whether I'm calling something's happening on my computer or what.
That's what John was hearing before.
Dave, could you please just start a meeting one at a time and find out where it's coming from?
Yeah.
I think it's everybody.
No, it's
Are we, is that any better?
Yes.
I
Okay, way
muted
better.
Carol, Barry, and John.
Say that again, Dave?
I muted Carol, Barry, and John, and the echo went away.
Okay. Okay, well, let me do the roll call for that. I may have to have Carol, Barry, and John. Jen, what's up? Jen, you're muted.
We can raise our hands to say we're here.
Oh, okay, all right. John. Thank you. Carol. Joanne, welcome. Jen. Paul.
Yes.
Barry.
Yes.
And Ed.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome. And I'm here too, surprisingly. Okay, so we do have a quorum, more than a quorum. So let's move on to the next item, which is the approval of minutes from the two previous meetings. I'm going to start with the June 29th meeting, and I have one quick correction to that, which is in the first item about the call to order, where we talked about a roll call in the form, and there was some suggestion or statement that the Board of Selectmen representative was not actually a member of the committee, but it was a liaison, and we've double-checked the beach use ordinance, and in fact, the Board of Selectmen representative is in fact a full member of the committee, so we're just going to delete that second sentence.
Thank you.
welcome, Ed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other changes, or does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes of the June 29th meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call again. John?
Here. Aye.
Here or not? Thank you. Carol? Okay. Joanne? Jen? Barry?
Aye.
And Paul?
Yes.
And Ed, I'm assuming since you weren't at that
I
meeting.
will abstain because I was not at either of those meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so adopted unanimously except one abstention. Now, the second is the minutes of the July 19th meeting. I don't have any corrections or anything to offer. Does anybody else? Okay, I don't see any hands waving. So would somebody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Thanks. Second, somebody?
Second.
Okay. John?
Aye.
Carol? Joanne? Thank you for those two hand waves. Jen? Hand wave, thank you. Barry?
Aye.
Okay. Paul?
Yes.
And I vote aye also. And again, Ed is abstaining. All right, so we have both minutes approved. approved. And our next item is, pardon me. Okay. A brief update on some previous committee actions. The animal control ordinance and the beach campfires. I checked in with Chief Sanford to see what, from the police department's perspective, whoops, Barry, are you waving or are you just changing something? Oh, okay.
He's just adjusting his screen.
Adjusting his screen,
The
thanks.
source of the echo is Barry, so if he continues doing what he's doing and mute himself until he speaks, that should be good.
Perfect, okay. So I did check in with Chief Sanford as to, from their perspective, what's the, how's the animal control ordinance, the new rules working out, and how are the beach campfire new rules working out? And he replied that so far things look pretty good on the animal control ordinance as well as on the beach campfires. They have the animal control ordinance. I mean, from my own personal perspective, when I've been on particularly the east end of the beach, I have mostly at the end of the day, I have seen pretty much every dog on leash. Everybody seems to be complying. He said there've been one or two violations they've seen, but generally it is going much, much better. And he anticipates that, you know, with by next summer, when these new rules have been in effect longer, people are more familiar with them. They only hope that it will continue to get better. Beach campfires, they've seen a fairly low request. I didn't ask him to give exact numbers, but overall a lower incidence of permit requests. Partially, of course, we think due to the weather. We've had a much rainier. Much more rain even since we reinstituted the campfires. And on the other hand, we have had incidents, we have had some documentation sent into us by a concerned citizen of what appears to be on the east end, a campfire that either was held properly in metal containers, but people dumped the contents out on the beach. They sent us pictures of partially burned wood all gathered in a particular area on the east end. So we forwarded that to the police department, again, hoping that they had followed up on that in some way, shape, or form, either by refusing to return the permit fee. We don't know yet. I don't have an answer on that. And this, if we see any more of that, we certainly ask the people out there to keep an eye on that too. If you're seeing any problems, either with smoke pollution or things like dumping of fire contents or whatever, certainly let us know or let the police department know. Because as the selectmen decided when they approved our recommendation to restart beach campfires, this is a matter that will be reviewed in the fall after we've had at least the second half of the summer to test out the new rules, et cetera. On Dinghy Point, the selectmen had requested some input from them, and we had originally said we think everything looks okay. I have seen more instances of things other than the traditional dinghies, more instances of more kayaks, et cetera, being left there. So for now, you know, I think no change in our recommendation. That's simply a matter maybe we'll take a longer look at. Again, we see huge amount of kayaks on the beach, and thank you to the KCT and their generous donor for putting out the kayak racks. Whether we have to think about, as more and more kayaks show up and need a place to be stored, whether we have to think about what to do with that or whatever. That's something I think for over the winter as we can think about the beach and get more input from how things work this summer. We have had our Beach Advisory Committee revised email account. I'm going to let Carol know, but we really welcome the input that we've gotten from there. Carol has been doing a great job on monitoring it and passing out to the rest of us input we've gotten from members of the community. I hope people will continue to use that and let us know what they're thinking or concerned about. Carol, do you want to say anything about that?
Just a little bit. The site BAC Advisory Committee at Kennebunkport.gov I found that I need to check it almost every day. And I do. I may have missed a day or so, but almost every day. We are using Outlook on an iMac by an old person. So it has been a definite learning process. Our goal is to respond immediately to your email. If you have not received notification that your email was received in a day or two, there's a problem. Some questions take time to answer, but you should get an immediate response. If by chance you leave an incorrect email address for a response, we then have to find you on Google. We then have to look where you live, and then we have to hand deliver your email response, so that takes a little bit of time. And I won't mention the person. So if you've not heard from us via BAC, there's another email address where we can be reached, and that is cshermangrb@gmail.com. Please use that if necessary, and thank you for your patience. The BAC is working hard to improve our communications. We want to hear from you, as Kate said. We believe that this is the best way to have the very best community. That's it.
Thank you, Carol, for what you do. That's a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much, Carol. Ken?
Yeah, sorry, I probably should have thank you, Carol, for that. I should have brought this up when we were talking about Dingy Point, but I don't know if it's appropriate to just mention the one incident that I think I sent an email round to all of you, but there was an incident where 3 people had kayaks, 3 kayaks of their own stored there. They got a note that was unidentified on them saying kayaks are not allowed to be stored here. And then the 3 kayaks disappeared. And this was 2 weeks ago, and their kayaks are gone. So they basically had 3 kayaks stolen.
Jennifer, did they check in with Chris Mayo down in Cape Porpoise? Because one of the lobstermen found 3 kayaks, and they were on Cape Porpoise Pier.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
And they found them off of Goose Rocks.
Ken, I also, first of all, I had never seen any place in the correspondence, whatever, that specifically identified where they had been supposedly left.
Oh, okay.
And I did bring them to the attention. I did ask Lori Smith about that about a week and a half ago. She was not at all familiar with it, hadn't seen the chain of postings that had happened either on the Goose Rocks Beach community as one or the 3 Towns 1 community. And she did check with the police department, who again had replied they had not had any report made to them about this. So I, again, didn't have any idea what the outcome was. That's interesting information.
So Ed, because I can get in touch with these people. So what's the situation? Who should they?
Well,
contact?
there were 3 kayaks. Well, I say 3. There were at least 2 kayaks on Cape Porpoise Pier last week. And I had asked the harbor master if I was teasing him. I said, well, are we renting kayaks down here now? Because we've got a lot of problems with kayaks in Cape Porpoise Harbor. People don't realize that they're in a kayak and not a 40-foot motorboat when they're in the harbor. And we had one person get run over, and a 12-year-old girl was injured, but not seriously, luckily. But in response to those kayaks, he said that one of the fishermen had picked him up off of Goose Rocks Beach floating out there.
Okay, that's great. I will pass that on to the person.
But I also had another woman come down one morning when I was leaving, and she said that she had lost 2 kayaks, but she thought that and this was down on Agamenticus Road in Cape Porpoise itself, but she had thought that hers had floated away because apparently they were here on vacation. And apparently they didn't understand how the tide works.
Okay.
But I doubt they got to Goose Rock, so it sounds.
No, I doubt they did either. And this was a week prior to the kayaks being found in Goose Rocks.
Good, thanks.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll pass that on. I appreciate it.
Sure.
great. Okay, the handicapped wheelchair, Paul, did you say you had a very brief update on where we stand on that?
Yeah, someone had, thanks to the discussion at the meeting last time, someone made a contribution to the Health Council of $100. Unfortunately, because of supply chain problems, the 2 wheels that we need are not available and won't be available for the rest of the summer. We did check with the rec department and their chair is available at the Tides, but you call the rec department and reserve for a day, $15 a day. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's get into subcommittee reports then. I'm going to briefly talk about the communications subcommittee, which I'm on along with Carol and Joanne. We are moving ahead. We also have one volunteer from the community, Fred Stafford, who has a lot of background in communications. And we could certainly, other interested parties would be welcome, and probably helpfully, particularly somebody, I'm sure Fred has a lot more background in technology certainly than I do. And Carol, I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but I know you and I are about the same. And so Joanne's better, but we could certainly use maybe somebody with more technology experience too. We are looking at having an initial meeting, trying to schedule a date and time and place, but looking at something the week of Labor Day is in, Labor Day week. So I will get that information out and invite people in the community who think they're interested. And we're going to be looking at, one of the things we've had on our agenda for actually this past year, but we got sidetracked into other more critical issues, is the issue of the proliferation of signs we have and how effectively do they convey the information they need to. And we want to look at that, obviously, but we're also looking at the broader picture of it just in general. How do we communicate information about the beach? We solved one issue, hopefully, with the revitalization of the email account, which is being used. There are other ways we communicate, and maybe some, we should do better, or there are other possibilities. So that's the broader picture that we're looking at, both the signage and communications in general. So anybody out there that has interests and time and talent in those areas, please just get in touch with me or Joanne or Carol, or send an email, and we'll certainly keep everybody apprised of when we're going to have that first subcommittee meeting. And then I'm going to possibly flip the order on the report on the subcommittees, because I know that the natural resources has a lot of stuff to talk about. So Barry, can I hand it over to you about traffic and safety, because you've got some interesting stuff going on too.
Absolutely, and thank you, Kate. And hopefully I got rid of the echo. I tried another. I fortunately had a second laptop with me, so.
That's a lot better.
I don't know what's wrong with the first one, but we'll investigate. So people on the call may remember that on our last call, we asked for some volunteers from the community. And fortunately, 2 gentlemen, Art LeMay and Tom Adler, stepped up. These are people with some experience and certainly very engaged in terms of their interest in the matter of safety regarding traffic in our community. We met probably week before last and spent an hour looking at some of the more obvious items that have come across, speed bumps and stop signs, etc. But we also looked at some what I would call out of the box ideas, and we're going to see where those lead. I think the takeaway from our first meeting was we really wanted to solicit from our community more ideas, more suggestions. It was felt that often in these types of situations, the people with the best ideas and the best concepts are the ones that actually live right there and see it every day. They see the cyclists, they see the parking issues, they see the speed, etc. And they often have some concrete ideas. So what we want to do, our game plan, is to first gather as much information from our local folks, those on the call, those on the committee, any ideas you would have, any observations you would have. And then what we will do is we're going to formulate those into some recommendations, sit down with the appropriate people from the town, the police chief, of course, and probably Lori, et cetera, formulate some recommendations that we'll bring back to the BAC, talk it over at this level, and then hopefully be able to come forward with some recommendations that will really improve the safety, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here. So again, I'll just pass it back to Kate, but just ask, please send in any ideas or call me if you want, and happy to discuss and listen to your thoughts on this.
Great. Thanks very much, Barry. And I want to comment sort of there that, I mean, recently we did have input from a member of the community through the email account, which actually concerns kind of both traffic and safety. It was raising an issue about the traffic and safety, traffic on particularly the west end of the beach, where there are no sidewalks at the point, and lots of activity in the summer with pedestrians needing to use it, as well as bicyclists, as well as, and suggesting that we put more signage down there, you know, warning people how slow to drive or whatever, which, you know, again, those of us in communications said, well, that's an interesting issue, continuation of yet more signs. Maybe the issue is also, can we come up, we'll be working, you know, very interested, and we pass that on to traffic and safety too, because the answer may not be more signage, it may be some other out-of-the-box creative idea on how to deal with what's seen as possibly dangerous situations along the west end. So thanks on that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's turn now to natural resources. John, is it you or Paul that's the...
Paul, I'll get Paul to introduce the thought.
Okay, well, let's
Yeah, why don't
you want to go through the things and get to the...
Sure, we'll just cover, I think, 2 items tonight. Carol will give a quick plover report, and then John has a follow-up on a discussion we had last meeting, the resolution regarding adaptation, apropos of what we were talking about tonight. And but anyway, Carol, why don't you go?
Okay. I was told to make this quick, so hang on. Piping plovers. Goose Rock Beach had 22 chicks that fledged. A quote from Maine Audubon about Goose Rock's Beach was, "That was quite impressive. Quite impressive, my foot. We did awesome." Absolutely awesome.
Go, girl.
We've done in decades. Algonquin and Phippsburg were the only 2 beaches that did better, with 25 and 29 fledged per beach. Why did we do so well? I mean, I don't know, but we'd like to think it's because of education and people caring that we share the beach. Honestly, a rainy July may have made a significant difference. As of August 13th of this year, the state of Maine officially fledged 208 piping plover chicks on Maine beaches. This beats last year's record of 199, which was also a record year. Piping plover. Lease terns. As for the feisty lease terns, a colony on the west end of Goose Rock's Beach was abandoned. One day they were there, the next day they were gone. It's possible that a predator spooked the colony. We did not have any chicks. Hopefully they'll come back next year. There were successful colonies at Kennebunk, Scarborough, and Phippsburg. For the shorebirds, there are 38 species of shorebirds that use Maine for at least part of their year. This group does not include herons, gulls, and cormorants, which we often see at Goose Rock's Beach. Goose Rock's Beach is a critical habitat for migratory birds. Many shorebirds pass through Goose Rock's Beach, using this area as a staging area for food and rest. Surveys suggest that the majority of shorebird species staging on the East Coast are suffering significant downward trends. In addition to population declines, recent studies of staging shorebirds are spending longer time in staging areas to acquire fat reserves that they need. Enjoy watching the migratory birds as they pass through Goose Rock's Beach on their way from northern breeding grounds to the wintering areas. Some wintering areas are literally thousands of miles away, like South America. You might be able to see a black-bellied plover, semi-palmated sandpiper, least sandpiper, short-billed dowitcher, ruddy turnstone, red-knot durlin, and spotted sandpiper. Now, I promised you that I would talk to you about when an endangered or threatened species will be declassified. I have a very long version, I have a medium version, I have a short version, and I have a very short version. I'm going to give you the very short executive version. If anyone wants any more information, I have hundreds of pages. So, very short executive summary given to us by Brad Zitsky, who's a shorebird biologist, Maine Department of Inland Fishery and Wildlife. Quote, there are many criteria on how discovery is determined. On how recovery is determined. Basically, due to their reliance on coastal beaches habitat, decrease of these habitats, and an increase in human use and disturbance, I doubt that we will meet the criteria in our lifetime. As such, there's no plan to delist piping plovers, nor do we think there will be in any time soon, end quote. I found all the information for the criteria of listing an endangered species if somebody wants to know. I have a 200-page piping plover recovery plan that was written in 1995, if someone knows. So call me at the BAC, email if you want it. That's it, I'm done, as promised.
Hey, Carol, that's great. And thank you for that follow-up to that question that was asked about delisting. Go ahead, John.
You know, one comment on the lease turns. I remember growing up in the 50s, 60s, there were always a colony on East Fair Rocks, on the gravel bar that comes out. They were always nesting there. And it's just interesting because obviously there are no dogs. There really isn't that many humans. I wonder if it's a higher tide. I wonder what it is that has prevented the lease turn from nesting there. And I wonder if it could be encouraged again. So maybe you talk to your lease turn folks, just see if maybe there's something we can do, because that was a very popular spot for decades. So
I asked them to see if there's something more that we could do to help lease turns.
Carol, is a lease turn what we call mackerel gulls with the pointy wings and they look like small seagulls, but much
and the
more.
black head.
Yeah.
Those are terns. There's a tern then that are bigger. The least terns are smaller.
Yeah, that's probably what we call the mackerel gulls.
They go after the little minnow fish if you want.
Yeah.
Where the stripers are,
Cape Porpoise is full of them.
Right.
But the seagulls, the herring gulls, drove them off in the 80s in the state when I first came back to Maine in the early 1990s. They went around and poisoned the seagulls on various islands along the coast because they were just wiping out. They'd push out the mackerel gull. And so they did make a comeback, and I've noticed significantly more of these gulls on the ocean than I have since I was a kid.
Well, they're at Kennebunk beaches. And
I wonder where they're nesting. That's interesting.
On the islands.
Islands,
Yeah, in Cape Porpoise for sure.
Yeah.
And on some of the old abandoned lobster cars and anywhere where people don't, and other predators don't disturb them.
Cool.
Hey, Carol, what was the spread of the plovers up and down the beach? Is it because, at the west end, there's that big new dune area that's gotten higher and deeper past your house.
Yeah, we had most of them there, but honestly, we had them from Jeffries Way, Dyke Road, and then the west end, we had them the whole beach. But if the west end continues to build up, but after hearing the climate report, that's
right.
a downer. That's where they were 20 years ago. A quarter of all the piping plovers in the state of Maine were on that one spot at Goose Rocks Beach.
That's amazing.
So, but thank you, and thank everybody that tries to protect them. So.
Okay, and no. John, we talked about some water quality issues last time, and there was a resolution that the Natural Resources Subcommittee worked on, and John has a quick, or not so quick, presentation on that.
Let's try to make it. Let's try to make it quick indeed.
And we shared the draft with the everybody on the beach committee. Maybe two versions, an early version and then a second one.
Right. And is this coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So basically just 2 slides. And again, this was, this began with the thought that there are going to be monies, and they're actually coming, and it's kind of an interesting story in the press today, the Portland press, about what's happening with towns looking for how to allocate the monies that are available through the American Rescue Plan. But the water quality at Goose Rocks is something that I think does merit addressing. And if we look at where our current situation is, the Maine Healthy Beaches, which is part of the Department of Environmental Protection in Maine, we have consistently ended up on some of what has been called the least safe category. And this is measured by what's called an FIB, a fecal indicator bacteria. These are bacteria that are in the intestinal tracts of all kinds of mammals, not just humans, but all of the small animals, big animals, the rodents, it's in seagulls. You get these indicators, these bacteria called enterococci that grow. And in some studies early on in the 80s and 90s, looking at areas where they knew that there were possible or known human waste in the water. And they would use these FIBs in order to say, okay, if the level gets high, then we'll assume the human waste is also high. And the human waste is the human bacteria is what is the most dangerous to humans. But there are a lot of other ways that these FIBs can get into the system. And if you don't know that you have human waste in your water, then you can be measuring something that is showing you a high FIB. I mean, the science is there. There it is in that sample, but it may not really mean that it's dangerous. So this is kind of the struggle a little bit that we're in today. We have regulations that say when it gets above a certain level, we need to post our beaches as being unsafe for swimming. And indeed, that is probably in an abundance of caution, something that's worth doing. What we don't know is how much of that is really human associated. And that is the piece that we feel is so important to try to pursue. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the focus we're trying to look at with our request to the town to spend some of this American Rescue Plan money to better understand what the FIB, these fecal indicator bacteria analyses, are telling us about our water. So our current situation, again, these FIBs are high. In the tidal rivers, we've done some DNA analyses, but really very little. It's a maximum of 65, maybe a few less. Some of these might be duplicate samples. But those samples did show that there was a 20% contribution of human fecal matter. Now, if that were to hold out in a larger study, that could be a concern. So that's what we want to know. And so what we are asking is that we could use some of that money to do more analyses of those potential human sources to find out if they're really there. Or is it some larger animal or other reasons why that FIB bacteria is high? We also know that we have a number of aging septic systems that feed into the tidal rivers. This is where the human bacteria could be coming from. So we need to understand what is the health of those systems. What are the healths of those systems? Also, we'd like to use that money perhaps to get sewers put into areas that are on septic now. All of the Prescott Woods, all that area in Goose Rocks that's beyond the community house, that's all septic today. The septic system, the sewer system stops before it reaches it. The thought is to use some of that money to extend in there and prevent any potential septic from getting into Goose Rocks Creek which feeds into Batson's, which comes out onto our beaches. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at. And then to look at having some money for septic mitigation. One thing that is crystal clear is that if your septic field is failing, it's beastly expensive to replace that field. So we need to find ways, folks on fixed income or for any one of us that would face that kind of high cost, to have some way to mitigate that for the benefit of us all, i.e. Safe water. And I probably mixed up what the situation is and what our plans are. And if I could get this thing to respond, I go to the next one. So proposed actions, this is what we have put in our resolution to the Board of Selectmen in hopes that the town would choose to use some of the money we're going to get to address these, to get better water sampling, not better water sampling, but increased and different water sampling, to look at the DNA to see if it's human. And then to find out what septic fields might be failing and establish grants or low interest loans to be able to help folks offset the cost of repairing that septic system, to extend the sewer systems to be able to get folks off of septic so it's no longer a concern. To work with Biddeford to understand, because in the Little River, the Biddeford area is also feeding in there, and to look for more money. So this is basically what we're pursuing. We know we have what's supposedly a dirty beach. The question is, what does that really mean? I don't think the water is a whole lot dirtier than it was when I was swimming there every week as a kid in those tidal rivers. The question is the DNA, is the human bacteria rising? If that's true, then we have a real concern. So we're hoping we can focus our efforts to look at that DNA balance.
John, I would just add on your second slide, the proposed actions. These came almost word for word out of the state report that was delivered to the Beach Committee. You had a presentation back in the winter, I forget which month, but this state DEP, following this 2-year study, made a number of recommendations, and these are essentially those recommendations.
That's right. It's not just us. And this is some folks that have had a lot of years in looking at this, as well as our own team here. We have a lot of expertise, and Steve Hanna and John Kreider and other folks that are looking at this together with us. So we're really blessed to have those resources.
So do you have the recommendation, the slide? Do you have a slide for that?
I do. I did bring, the recommend, that's proposed actions. I have a copy of the resolution. Would you like that up?
Yeah, what we're asking the committee is to approve a resolution, which we would then send along to the Board of Selectmen in the town.
Right, and with any luck, let's see, I need to stop sharing. Here we go. Let me start sharing. Let me bring this up. And hopefully that is there. Is that visible?
Yep.
Yes.
So this is the thought. I think it's largely going to be reinstating, maybe much more clearly than I, what the givens are, and then our resolution, our ask is that we could prioritize identification of the fecal source, looking at both wastewater and stormwater infrastructure, looking at upgrades, investigate what sources might be coming in, and then look at extending that sewer system to get folks off of septic, which would be wonderful. Expand education outreach initiatives. Also, this is important to look at promoting the best use and practices to reduce. We know that our rates go way up with high rainfall. And what that suggests is the stormwater that is washing off of our streets, dog fecal matter in there, chemicals on lawns, etc. That stormwater is washing in. So what can we do to limit the contribution that would come from there? So that's an education thing. And then the idea of working with Biddeford, and then also to establish perhaps some help and support, financial support, for the high cost of mitigating a septic issue. So those were the pieces.
Okay.
I just said one other comment that the funds that have come to the town or are coming, through the state is somewhat limited, and of course could never ever handle all of this. But if these infrastructure packages actually do happen, then there could be more money, over the next period of years. And the thought was to hopefully focus some of that on this problem.
We have, throw it open for comments and questions from members of the committee.
Well, I would like to say that as your selectman, I have not heard anything definitive about the money coming to us at this point. Laurie's very good at informing us when we're getting money and when we're supposed to get money. And so far, the town has not heard anything. It sounds like Paul read something in the paper today, so that's a good sign. But I have no idea if or how much we're going to get. We certainly won't get enough to be able to complete your entire list.
Absolutely. And we never would have suggested that.
Yeah.
It's just trying to put a.
But I think the testing component of it is probably a good place to start to find out where you are in this process. And I would be willing to bet most anything that I have that there's less contamination, or at least fecal, whether especially human today, than there was when we were kids, because the sewer, as many of you know, wasn't put into Goose Rocks until the 1990s. And I know in Cape Porpoise, here where I live and where I grew up, when they put the sewer in the 1980s, people still had straight pipes right into the harbor. There were no septic systems at a lot of homes.
Yep.
And as somebody who had his own septic system replaced 3 years ago, and I paid for it right out of my pocket. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's about 25 grand.
Yep, it's a lot of money.
And the only way I knew mine failed, John, was when I was mowing the lawn and I looked down, I'm like, uh-oh, what's that big, literally gray puddle in the corner of my
God.
God.
The grass grew well.
It grew very well.
So you had to mow more often.
Yeah, but I hear that. But thank you for that. Yeah.
This question, and I appreciate Ed's input on that. I do, and obviously we've been here had our home here 23 years on septic, because we're back up in that area behind the community house, and try to be religious about pumping it and all that. But I can understand, I don't want to have to replace my septic field at all. I am, it seems, I don't know whether I'm just being made more aware of this, but it does seem like maybe part of the Maine Healthy Beaches testing. I am more aware that we seem to have issues red flagged more frequently. And obviously I'm concerned about that from the standpoint of public health and safety. Myself, anybody I know or care about swimming in water that might be potentially dangerous. But I'm also concerned, I would think perhaps, and this is kind of just thinking, I don't know if you want to call it outside the box. It's also an issue that I think might be of concern, not just to the town, but to the business community. Because if this beach becomes known or flagged as a beach that has problems, has health problems, certainly it's going to affect those of us who are homeowners here, our property values, but it's also going to affect the business community, because Goose Rocks Beach is a big portion of what draws people to this town in the summertime. And so I'm wondering if, this is an issue. We're sort of kind of asking that the priority be raised a little bit, or if possible, if there are impossible solutions looked at, or further testing, if there are funds that become available. But I'm also wondering whether the town can somehow talk with the business community to see if it's of a higher priority for them once they understand what's going on, and what might be the outcome if things are not improved, or if we become known more often by, and more widely as a town that has an unhealthy beach. Anybody else have any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, I'm not seeing any unless
Carol.
Carol, sorry.
I think getting accurate data is our first step, because that's how we'll know what our next step is. If we don't have accurate data, then we just, we guess. So my choice would be get us some accurate data, find out what our real situation is, and proceed from there. That would be my first.
I would agree with you, Carol. I mean, what you've asked for, what you've put in this resolution in a world where we had unlimited finances would be an excellent solution, hopefully, to this problem. But given that we don't have unlimited finances, identifying the actual problem first and then working to mitigate it from there would be my suggestion. As a member.
I think that's a key point, Ed, is to see if, let's find out if we have a concentration of human DNA. If we do, then that leads us to look down the road for other things. And that's, I would agree very much with that.
As we used to say in the Army, let's run it up the flagpole and see who salutes.
So Ed, are you saying that everybody who's out there, and I think we're pretty much agreed that nobody's trying to tell the town how to spend whatever money the town doesn't even know if they're going to be getting yet. I think.
I just don't want to see you set up for unrealistic expectations. That's all. I mean, everybody in town look at all the money we had to pay and fight and to create this committee and keep Goose Rocks Beach being a public beach that we all knew we owned all the way through. And we had to spend $1 million to do that. So there's certainly the sentiment amongst the members of the community that we want to preserve Goose Rocks Beach and make sure that it's safe for everybody. Again, the sad reality of it is it's probably a lot safer today in 2021 than it was in 1980. Since I've been going there as a little kid in the 70s and the 80s and et cetera, because of the sewer system. But I certainly wouldn't tell you not to put forth your resolution. I'm going to abstain myself from voting for it for the simple fact that it's not right for me to vote in either the affirmative or the negative this evening and then have to go and make the decision when it comes down to spending the money for the town, because I don't think that's fair to the rest of the community. It's not fair to this board for me to make a decision tonight. But, I commend your actions.
Okay.
And I just had one observation, and I think this work is absolutely great. And I agree with what others have said, that we have to get the facts first and find out exactly what we're dealing with first. I just make one casual observation. We're at the west end of the beach with the tidal pools, and I've been going out there for many, many years with the grandchildren, and even just to walk through myself. And there is a noticeable difference in those tidal pools in terms of pollutants. Now, again, it's just what I'm observing. So I'm very anxious to see what these tests come back and to see what exactly we're dealing with.
Barry, can you define what you see as pollutant?
Well, it's a combination of discoloration. It's a combination of soot or, hard to describe, but it's not clean water. And I know when I was there, well, I guess it's week before last with my grandchild, and I kept them away from that part of it. So it looked distasteful to me, and I don't mean literally, I mean figuratively. But I'd love to find out what it is.
It's not just the overabundance of rain we had, because, growing up, this was one of the beauties of growing up here in town. Me and my friends, we played all over the town, all over the islands in Cape Porpoise, which are full of tidal pools. And when the water becomes brackish, and I read in the email that you guys sent out that you noticed at the end of the little river that the water was brown. That's to some extent a natural occurring event. When you have salt water and fresh water mix, they turn brown. Go down to the Kennebunk River, and you can see that on the incoming tides. And after a heavy rain event, you'll see it as well. So some of these things may be natural, but I do agree with you. They look pretty nasty and they smell really bad.
Yeah.
But they may not be a direct result of human contamination, other than the sense of an excess of rain, perhaps from climate change.
Yeah,
That's exactly the testing we need to do.
Yes, and I would support that. Yeah.
But I'm trusting I'm hoping you're right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not omniscient by any stretch of the imagination. If I was, I probably wouldn't be on the Board of Selectmen.
John, were you saying something? You kind of got overlapped with Barry, and I didn't quite hear what you were saying.
I'm sorry, me?
Thought you were trying to make a comment or reply.
No, I just verbal diarrhea as usual. That's all.
I guess my only other comment before I'll make the motion is that we've been doing this test since 2004, 5, 6, and we basically have the same results year after year after year because the state is providing the money. We haven't provided any money to this. We provide resources, public health official, a lot of volunteers. We provide that kind of support, but the money's come from the state, but it's been limited because they're doing the whole state, every beach community that participates. So it's a kind of a request that we locally supported some more with some money to have better testing.
All right. Well, okay, so do we have all the comments from the committee at the moment? Do we have any comments from the public?
There are no hands raised.
Paul, can I assume that this is the form of a motion? I mean, you've called it a resolution, but technically if we were going forward, we would need
A motion.
I was taking this to be a motion.
Absolutely. Sorry.
All right. So why don't you formally move this and second it, and then we can, if there's a little bit further discussion, we can do that, or we can decide to take a vote.
So I make a motion that we adopt the proposal as shown on the screen and delivered to all the members of the board, the version that went out maybe at the end of last week, Friday, Thursday, but it's the one that John showed.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there any further discussion or suggestions that it be limited or amended or anything else?
No, I just think when you know better, you do better. And that's where we're aiming here.
Joanne, is that you?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah. Everybody's picture up there. Okay, so are people prepared to vote on this at this point?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do a roll call. I'm going to start with Joanne, or the people whose faces I can actually see right now. Joanne?
Aye.
Okay, Jen?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Okay. Paul?
Yes.
Ed, I'm abstaining.
Yeah, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, I will abstain from this. Thank you.
Thank you. And John?
Aye.
All right. And I will vote aye also. So we have 7 ayes, 1 abstention. So the motion is carried, and we will send this forward to the Board of Selectmen to consider.
And I hope that John and Paul will be there when it comes to the board so that you can explain your rationales behind this to the rest of the board.
Thank you.
Because I know there'll be questions.
I'd be pleased. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We had done a little bit of rearranging on the agenda. In the past, we've often had public comments for matters not on the agenda first, but we've decided now to put them at the end. So if there are any items that people want to discuss that weren't on the agenda, that seems to be a sort of logical point to talk about them. So I'm going to open that up now. Dave, are there any hands out there?
No hands up.
Okay, take that as news that we're hopefully doing a good job and covering enough items that people are interested in. All right, let's move on to the question of future meetings. I think in the past, we have tended to do like a meeting in the fall and then a meeting sometime in the early winter, and then maybe one sometime like in March or April, getting ready for the more active time of year that we need to be ready for. I also don't know, so I think we need to talk about frequency of meetings going forward, if that sounds like something we should stay with, or whether we need, do we see more issues coming up, more activity? Do we need to have more frequent meetings? And certainly there's at least one issue that the Board of Selectmen has already said they want to take a look at in sometime in the fall once the summer season is over and has been sort of looked at, as in the campfires. And the other question is, of course, we don't know yet, but the Board of Selectmen did vote last week, I think it was, that future town committee meetings, town board and committee meetings would go forward on Zoom.
That is correct.
That's very
until further notice, and we, with the Delta variant and the next variant, et cetera, I would probably plan that we will be Zooming for a while.
Okay. That is very helpful. And I actually, from the standpoint of this committee, I think we've found the Zoom meeting format very helpful, since, many of the people who own property at Goose Rocks or might live there part of the year are elsewhere. And this has given us a much better format to reach more of our constituents or our community, so to speak. So
yeah, other than the technical issues that some of us have had, including the town, it's been good. We went through the short-term rental ordinance and we were accused of everything under the sun, including doing it behind closed doors, which I thought was very ironic, since I don't think any issue had ever been more publicly vetted in the history of Kennebunkport. Right. No matter how you came down on the issue, but we certainly, it was very beneficial, and I think that it will be beneficial to the folks who live in Goose Rocks, especially the folks who are only here in the warmer weather.
Yeah, I agree, Ed. I think it's a real boon to the town in general, since it has many more seasonal visitors or people who own here, and it's just opened it up to a whole lot of people being able to feel that they have a chance to take part in town committees and boards, et cetera.
And we're hoping to continue some sort of a hybrid model when this is over. I did vote against the resolution, but mostly because I wanted to see the proof, because they had run, David's here, he could attest to it, but they had run some tests prior to the ordinance, and they weren't very good. And we don't have, maybe we do now, but at the time we did not have technology that would run where we could be at the fire station having our meeting, or anybody could, and then have public input in a manner that was in any way, shape, or form easy for the audiovisual staff to operate or even worked at all.
Yeah, I talked with Dave and I've talked with Lori, and I really appreciate the hard work everybody in the town staff is doing to try and make this work. You're between I didn't even know we were on Netflix, but the public access television and the filming the recording to put on the town website, as well as, the people being able to hear us if we're there in person. It sounds like busier than a one-armed paper hanger.
I think we're doing pretty good, considering I dare say that every one of us in this room went to college before Al Gore had invented the internet. I think we've done well.
I think we've done very well, and some of us are definitely less technologically proficient, so we're in absolute awe of.
Paul, did you go to school when they had the internet? Don't tell me you did.
I didn't go to school.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, how many times did the committee meet last off-season? Was it like,
I think it was usually once in the fall, as I said, once sometime, or usually it's something in around October or November, then usually something around, I don't have the minute book in front of me to go back and double check, something around maybe February or so, and then something April-ish and May.
4 times, 4 to 5 times max.
It sounds like. So
I think it's going to make a big difference if we can maintain a Zoom meeting because February is, whether I can get there or not, is weather dependent.
Right.
So if it's Zoom, there's never going to be an issue, and
Again, we just don't know what's going to happen with the Zoom platform, because we have to operate under the rules of the state of Maine and under an emergency edict, if you will. Even though it's been rescinded, they've given us the authority to continue our public meetings via Zoom, obviously for safety's sake. And I don't know how long they will allow us to do that, but I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
And hopefully, as you said, even if the state's sort of emergency guidelines or permissiveness goes away, we could, as a town, possibly decide to, at least if we can solve the technological problems, add a hybrid component so that people could still continue to, whether a board member could still continue to do it that way and vote. But at least
that's what our ordinance says. We'd probably have to do it over at North Street. I mean, you'd have to ask David that, because he's the technical guy, right, David? He's not listening to me.
No, I'm listening. I just have to juggle some things to speak.
Okay, but that is our plan, right, David?
He's working.
Yeah. Somebody's got to work.
Well, if we can get a decent hybrid, that's going to be a real plus. So let's hope it can work.
Mm-hmm. I think they will.
Very close to a good hybrid.
Yeah. Well, speaking of technology, Ed, you have definitely showed me how to put the blur background. I really like that.
I don't want you to see how messy my office is.
No, that's really great. I think that's one of it. It's a new thing. It's a new version of Zoom, guys. You're on Zoom. Take your virtual background, hit the blur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
I hadn't thought about the blur. I used to have.
Hey, John, can we put hair on our heads?
No, that I've tried. I can get the cat mask though. Did you see that actually went? I don't know how to do that filter to make me a cat. I think that would be kind of cool.
Okay, so back to how about looking? Well, first of all, we presumably want to be able to report to the selectmen at one of their fall meetings, and you all are meeting twice a month, I presume, in September.
Yeah, and usually in November and December we only meet once a month because of the holidays. So we'll have our first meeting on the second Thursday of, it always confuses me, but I think it's the second Thursday of the month or the first Thursday. But we'll have that early meeting both in November and December, and then we will just meet to sign the warrants when our second meeting would normally take place.
In December, right?
Yeah, and well, usually I think in November as well. It depends on where it falls with Thanksgiving.
Right.
But definitely in December, we'll only have probably one. Well, all our meetings, of course, are public, but one big meeting.
Okay, and I'm assuming once you get into that part of the year too, you're more heavily oriented to, the budget issues and things like that.
Not quite then. We will start our discussion about budget and Lori will have her team, coming up with their priorities and their dream list, and then they'll go through, of course, as they go forward and whittle it down to reality. But
is that March? That's usually around March, isn't
right?
it?
But she'll get the department heads thinking about it towards the end of the year.
Got it.
Right.
But I think if we met sometime in November, then this board would be ready to present to the Board of Selectmen in December.
I was thinking even if we met next sometime in late September or early October, then we would be ready to either be able to address any issues you might ask us to address, but also gather the information, whatever we hear from the community. By then, our communications subcommittee will have had a chance to meet, and we can start doing some work there. But I'm mostly concerned, I guess, for the fall about making sure we have a chance to get, some report to you on what we think, what's happened at the beach, get some information from the police
And we
chief.
can discuss the fire, see how that worked out. And I don't think we need to make a decision. When I say we, I mean the Board of Selectmen. We don't necessarily need to make a decision until next spring at the latest. I mean, it would be good to discuss it in the fall because then it'll all be fresh in everybody's mind as to how it went and what happened. And because I don't know about the rest of you, but I know that sometimes I get false memories. I swear to you, I could tell you I actually did something or I saw something and it's just not true. It just, things creep into your head.
Okay. Well, how about, what about if we propose that our next meeting take place either very end of September or early part of October? Does that make sense to people on the committee?
That works.
Works for me.
Yeah, because we still have
Fine with me.
a lot of people here in September. I mean, September is far from a dead month, so to speak, in terms of business.
Yeah.
So
You'll have to get used to me. The last couple committees I've been on, I've simply been an advisory member. So sometimes if I seem a little slow on the uptake, it's been a while since I've been a voting member of an actual committee.
Wow.
Well, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad to be here because, as you know, I will be the chairman of the board next year. So I think that it's good for me to be exposed to other parts of the town. I just don't want to live in the little Cape Porpoise bubble over here.
Okay. Thank you. Delighted to have you learn more about us here and, get to know you better.
I have some very fond memories, which we will not discuss at these meetings, about being a teenager on Goose Rocks Beach.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, what happened back then stays.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that was back in the 80s. We won't go there.
Okay, so can we take a vote that, I don't know if we need a formal vote. Are we agreed that we will look for possible meeting dates? Obviously, we have to talk with Dave and everybody about availability.
Yep.
Sometime first half of October, roughly.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, all right. Then from there, we can worry about, think about, okay, are we going to set what are we going to do over the course of the winter and early spring? Kind of the rest of the year. Maybe try and aim to lay some dates out so that the community will, and the rest of the town government will know where we might be working. Because I think there's going to be a lot of interesting activity going on with the works of the various subcommittees, and hopefully we'll have more involvement from members of the community. So I will talk with Dave and send the requisite emails out to try and come up with some possible dates and send them out to everybody to look for a date in the first half of October. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, my only request would be, it would be helpful maybe at the September meeting to pick the dates for the whole winter so that we can put it on our calendars and, and I'd rather cancel a meeting if we don't need it. I know in the early days of the beach committee, that's what we would do. We would plan them every other month and then we would just cancel them. But
Okay.
it was on people's calendars. With Zoom, it's a lot easier because you don't have to physically be here. But for people who have to travel, it's always been a challenge.
Well, that's what essentially I was suggesting that we would do. Let's look for the meeting date for the first half of October. We will have, September's a busy month, usually almost as busy as the summer that has been recently here at the beach. We will have sort of a recap of what's happened at the beach in the October meeting to see what the subcommittees are doing and recap what has happened at the beach, get input from the police commissioner, the police chief, et cetera. And then at that meeting, that will also be an agenda item, just lay out possible meeting dates, frequency dates for the balance of the winter and spring.
Good.
Okay, so I will look for suggestions for possible dates the first 2 weeks of October and get them out to you as soon as I can. And I think that does it then. Can I have a motion to adjourn unless somebody has something else?
Move to adjourn.
Thanks, Ed.
Don't blow up. You'll never get an argument out of me out of that. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's
There
getting
you
late.
go, buddy. That's right. But a beautiful day today to fish, though.
Oh, it was absolutely gorgeous. We were
just a
offshore today.
beautiful day. Yeah, beautiful day.
Do I have a second? Thank you very much.
Second, good night, Ed.
Good night, Paul.
And adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, folks.
Good night. Nice to see you all, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.